Live from New Delhi, you're watching DD India News Hour, India's voice to the world. I'm Siddharth Bharadwaj. Coming up in the next hour. India elected to the United Nations Human Rights Council for the 7th time for the term 2026-28. This reflects India's unwavering commitment to human rights and fundamental freedoms. US government shutdown enters its third week as Senate rejects Republican funding bill for the 8th attempt. Hamas hands over 4 more bodies of hostages after Israel threatens aid cut. Trump issues stern warning to Hamas, says it must disarm. Trump warns Argentina of aid cut if Javier Milei loses midterm elections later this month. Remarks come days after US promised a $20 billion bailout plan. Fed Chair Powell flags rising employment risks in the US, noting a sharp slowdown of job creation as private sector figures lay bare slowdown in hiring on September. The US Senate on Tuesday rejected a potential funding deal for the 8th time, guaranteeing that the government shutdown that has caused disruptions in services across the country will continue. US President Donald Trump said his administration planned to produce a list on Friday of Democrat programs that will be closed as a result of the ongoing federal government shutdown. Speaking to reporters on Tuesday, Trump promised to use the shutdown as an opportunity to exert more leverage over federal spending.
Democrats are getting killed on the shutdown because we're closing up programs that are Democrat programs that we were opposed to. So we're being able, and they're never going to come back in many cases. So we're being able to do things that we were unable to do before. So we're closing up programs that are Democrat programs that we wanted to close up or that we never wanted to happen, and now we're closing them up. And we're not going to let them come back.
Meanwhile, the Senate failed in its 8th attempt to pass legislation approved last month by the House of Representatives that would end the shutdown by providing government funding through November 21st. The Senate voted 49 to 45 to advance the bill, short of the 60 yes votes needed in the 100-member Senate controlled by Republicans. The government shutdown entered its third week with Republican and Democratic lawmakers continuing to blame each other for the impasse. The number of US federal worker layoffs as a result of the government shutdown was revised downward on Tuesday, suggesting the Trump administration's initial statement about sweeping job cuts was too ambitious. The Trump administration has dismissed more than 4,100 employees since 1st of October, the day the US government shutdown began. The Justice Department last week, in a separate count filing, estimated the figure was at least 4,200. President Donald Trump blamed the cuts on US government shutdown. The government is closed because Trump and lawmakers have failed to agree on a spending plan for federal agencies. Trump is trying to pressure Democrats into accepting his spending plan by firing federal workers and cutting programs he says Democrats favor. All right, and DD India's Akshay Dongre joins us live on this. Hi, Akshay. Very good morning. Akshay, how do you assess the situation in the United States as the government shutdown enters its third week?
Well, the situation remains complicated, Siddharth, and we have been reporting about the impasse that has been there now for 3 weeks, especially with the U.S. government utilizing this opportunity to also take out the issues that it was finding it difficult to, for example, spending cuts, for example. the Democrat programs that have been running in the U.S. in different states. So as far as the government shutdown is concerned, they are being targeted more. Also, the Republican government at this point in time has no concrete answers to how to resolve this impasse, especially with U.S. President Donald Trump at the helm. Maintaining quite a stubborn outlook as far as this entire situation is concerned. So, in every shutdown, the government and whatever party is in power tries to make efforts to find a solution with the opposition. But this time around, it seems that. The kind of budget cuts that are happening for Democrat programs, the government, instead of dialogue and coming to terms by sitting on the same table, they're trying to pressurize the opposition into conceding to their demands. And now, how that is going to work out, it's quite difficult to say. But the situation may just get more complicated in days to come.
Definitely. Akshay, we understand that there are growing differences between Republicans and Democrats as far as the healthcare issue is concerned. But are there other issues as well?
Well, there are multiple issues. There are issues about immigration. There are issues about the National Guards being deployed in the country in different parts. There are issues over education. There are issues over minimum wage. So there are many issues as far as inflation is concerned. Manufacturing base is concerned, immigration issue, especially with the H-1B visa and the two parties differing views on the entire matter, on the tariff issue. So there are a range of issues on which the two parties differ fundamentally. So, and especially with Donald Trump there, being the president of the US, he's taking a much more rigid stand that the Republican Party has taken in the years, in fact, past few decades. So that is why we are seeing an impasse, and that is why there is no solution in sight even after 3 weeks.
Talking about solution, Akshay, solution could only be possible if Democrats and Republicans sit across the table and resolve the budget dispute. We have talked about it earlier as well. But if the deadlock continues, what do you think the repercussions could be?
Well, if the deadlock continues, then clearly there will be, these federal programs that will get hit. But from the looks of it, it seems that, instead of taking that thing as a pressure, US President Donald Trump may further take steps to further corner the Democrat states and, take action singularly against the states that are ruled by the Democrats. So this is again going to be a major political turmoil in the US.
All right, we leave it there, Akshay. Thank you so much. The US and China on Tuesday began charging additional port fees on ocean shipping firms that move everything from holiday toys to crude oil, making the high seas a key front in trade war between the world's two largest economies. A return to an all-out trade war appeared imminent last week after China announced a major expansion of its rare earths export controls, and President Donald Trump threatened to raise tariffs on Chinese goods to triple digits. But after the weekend, both sides sought to reassure traders and investors, highlighting cooperation between their negotiating teams and the possibility they could find a way forward. China said it had started to collect the special charges on US-owned, operated, built or flagged vessels, but clarified that Chinese-built ships would be exempted from the levies. Similar to the US plan, the new China-imposed fees would be collected at the first port of entry on a single voyage or for the first 5 voyages within a year. Also, US President Donald Trump was considering terminating some trade ties with China, including in relation to cooking oil. China has sharply reduced US soybean purchases, which Trump has called a negotiation tactic. Trump said this month he hopes to discuss soybeans with his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping, while also warning the US may halt a large share of imports from China. Amid rising tensions, President Trump and US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent struck a hopeful tone ahead of upcoming trade talks, raising cautious optimism that Washington and Beijing can steer their rivalry toward dialogue. Here's more.
The world's two largest economies once again locked horns, this time on the high seas. The United States and China have begun imposing additional port fees on ocean shipping firms, targeting vessels that carry everything from crude oil to consumer goods. The move has opened a new front in the intensifying trade war, signaling that both nations are willing to extend their economic rivalry beyond tariffs and technology. The escalation follows Beijing's decision to expand export controls on rare earth elements, a critical component for global industries ranging from electronics to defense.
I can tell you it was highly inappropriate for them to announce these export controls on the day that the peace deal was announced and overshadow that.
While China maintained its dual stance, vowing to continue the tariff fight if provoked but keeping the door open for talks, signs of cautious optimism emerged. President Donald Trump's conciliatory remarks and Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent's assurance that the upcoming US-China dialogue remains on track helped lift investors' sentiment, with Wall Street closing sharply higher in the previous session.
The Chinese economy is doing very poorly, and maybe they're trying to take focus off of that. They purchase Iranian oil, and we have been calling them out on that. So maybe it was to distract from that. And three, maybe it was a mistaken attempt to try to gain leverage before the two leaders meet in Korea in October. And I can tell you, trying to get leverage in front of a meeting with Donald Trump is a bad idea.
As the tensions simmer and talks loom, the coming weeks will test whether Washington and Beijing can steer rivalry towards dialogue or risk turning economic brinkmanship into a deeper global confrontation. Nishchoy Roy's report for DD India.
US President Donald Trump on Tuesday threatened to pull assistance for Argentina if the nation's internal politics do not go the United States' way in its upcoming elections. Trump and Argentina's President Milei met at the White House just days after the US agreed to provide a major financial lifeline to the nation. Trump threw his support behind the Argentine president's upcoming bid for re-election next year, calling the possibility of his victory very important. Trump also gave Argentines a clear ultimatum about Milei's 2027 re-election bid, saying if he doesn't win, we are gone.
We're going to work very much with the president. We think he's going to win. He should win. And if he does win, we're going to be very helpful. And if he doesn't win, we're not going to waste our time because you have somebody whose philosophy has no chance of making Argentina great again. I'm with this man because his philosophy is correct. And he may win and he may not win, but I think he's going to win. And if he wins, we're staying with him. And if he doesn't win, we're gone.
Trump endorsed Javier Milei in a social media post after their meeting and praised Milei, calling him a great leader. Meanwhile, Milei said he was honored to visit the White House and praised Trump's peacemaking efforts in the Middle East.
Thank you very much for receiving me. Thank you very much for what you are doing for the free world. And many thanks to Secretary Bessent for the enormous task he has carried out, which allows us to have a path to move forward calmly and do what upstanding Argentines need, and which I believe will be a good case to show the world that the ideas of liberty work and generate prosperity.
The US government has revoked visas of more than 50 Mexican politicians and officials as part of President Trump's crackdown on drug cartels and their suspected political allies. The move has sent quite shockwaves through Mexico's political elite. Most affected are from President Claudia Sheinbaum's ruling Morena party. Washington offered no explanations, citing actions contrary to America's national interest from corruption to aiding cartels. Former US diplomats said such mass revocations are unprecedented and could strain US-Mexico cooperation. Dubbed the visa snatcher, US envoy Christopher Landau has led similar action across Latin America, signaling Washington's growing willingness to use visas as a weapon of foreign policy. And still to come on DD India News. UN warns that minors now make up nearly half of Haiti's armed gangs. New Peruvian president swears in top cabinet members. Madagascar is in political turmoil as the military seizes control.
Jaipur.
You're watching DD Indian News, or I'm Siddharth Bharadwaj. Hamas handed over more bodies to deceased hostages to Israel on Tuesday since US President Donald Trump touted his plan to end the Gaza conflict. The bodies were returned after Israel announced it would cut in half the number of humanitarian aid trucks allowed into Gaza in a move to punish Hamas. Meanwhile, re-emergent Hamas fighters demonstrated they were reasserting control in Gaza by deploying hundreds of security forces in the streets and executing several people they accused of collaborating with Israel. The outlook for Trump's peace plan darkened further when the president threatened Hamas with military strikes unless the militant group disarmed.
I don't have to explain that to you, but if they don't disarm, we will disarm them. They know I'm not playing games. Okay, now, we did something monumental. We got the hostages back. That was the first thing we had to do. Above all else, get the hostages back. Now, they misrepresented because we were told they had 26, 24 of dead hostages, if we can use those terms. And it seems as though they don't have that.
After Israel-Hamas ceasefire agreement, rebuilding Gaza is a monumental task due to the unprecedented scale of destruction and immense political, financial and logistical challenges. United Nations says that an estimated $70 billion cost to be incurred on rebuilding Gaza. Several European and Arab nations and the United States have expressed their willingness to contribute in the reconstruction of the devastated territory. Raghav Kumar Jha puts into perspective the Herculean task of rebuilding Gaza and the challenges ahead.
Thousands of displaced Palestinians returned to Gaza City after the US brokered ceasefire took effect on Monday. Families navigate rubble to the ruins of homes they had not seen for the past 2 years. Anxious to see what remained of their homes and wary of further hardships, they hope for a day when their native place would be reconstructed.
God willing, this will be the last war we see. There's nothing left of us. I am now old. I will be lucky if I witness the reconstruction of Gaza.
Almost all of Gaza's 2.2 million population has been displaced by the war, which erupted in October 2023 after Hamas-led militants stormed into Israel and killed around 1,200 people and took 251 hostages. Israel's retaliatory air and ground war killed over 67,000 people, reduced much of the coastal Gaza Strip to vast tracts of rubble, and wrought a humanitarian disaster. A comprehensive Gaza and West Bank interim rapid damage and needs assessment IRDNA report, released by the World Bank, EU and the UN in February, painted a grim picture. According to this assessment, from October 2023 to January 2025, the estimated physical damages incurred were around $29.9 billion, and economic and social losses amounted to $19.1 billion. So reconstructing Gaza is a Herculean task. UNDP says an estimated $70 billion cost to be incurred on rebuilding Gaza, and European and Arab nations and the US appear willing to contribute to the estimated cost.
We've heard very positive news from a number of our partners, including European partners, the European Union, Canada, for instance, as well. The Germans have indicated some funding, and as I mentioned yesterday, there were also discussions with the United States in terms of their interest to support the early recovery and humanitarian efforts as well.
Gulf states, Saudi Arabia, UAE, and Qatar have pledged $15 to $20 billion. Egypt and Jordan have promised to fund $3 to $5 billion. United States has pledged to give $1 to $2 billion. European Union and UK have pledged to give $5 to $8 billion. The United Nations World Bank have promised to fund $5 to $10 billion. Besides, the private sector has promised an investment of $5 to $10 billion in Gaza. It is estimated that clearing the massive amount of rubble, as much as 55 million tons, could take 15 years alone. This process is made more difficult and dangerous by the presence of unexploded ordnances and human remains. Numerous and conflicting proposals for the reconstruction of Gaza are being developed by various international parties, including the United States Arab League and the United Nations. But the path to implementation remains complex due to ongoing disagreements over security, governance, and the role of Hamas. Raghav Kumar Jha's report for DD India.
In Haiti, a disturbing new front in the gang crisis is emerging. Children are being recruited into the fight. The UN warns that minors now make up nearly half of Haiti's armed gangs, making it inevitable they'll be caught in the crossfire. Years of escalating gang warfare have left the nation in chaos, with schools shuttered and 680,000 people displaced, double last year's figure. The UN's newly restructured gang suppression force, led by Kenya, aims to restore order, but funding remains uncertain. UNICEF's regional director vowed that all personnel will be trained to protect children as Haiti's youngest face unimaginable dangers amid the violence.
We have all mechanisms in place to ensure that whoever will be mandated on the ground actively to carry out this operation is properly trained, is properly knowledgeable of our protocols in respecting the humanitarian law, and trained also on protecting children and adolescents, because inevitably, because of the statistic and demographics of the situation, inevitably children and adolescents will be caught into crossfire, into situation of operation as a bystanders, but also as members themselves of the armed groups.
In Haiti's capital, Port-au-Prince, relentless gang warfare has forced Doctors Without Borders to shut down its emergency clinic indefinitely. The closure in Turgio follows repeated attacks, including MSF vehicles riddled with bullets, as violence spirals out of control. Armed gangs have seized much of the capital, cutting off vital supplies, trapping residents and crippling medical care. With aid groups retreating and hospitals barely functioning, Haiti's healthcare system titters on total collapse. Peruvian President Jose Herri swore in the first members of his cabinet on Tuesday and named retired police general as interior minister to oversee his war against crime. Jose Herri assumed the presidency last week after parliament voted to impeach unpopular leader Dina Boluarte. Herri, in fact, named Vicente Tiburcio as his interior minister and appointed lawyer Ernesto Alvarez as the head of his 19-member cabinet, which includes 4 women. The government said in a statement, Tiburcio was chosen for his experience in fighting organized crime, drug trafficking and terrorism. Herri had vowed to tackle a wave of extortion and murder that has plagued Peru in recent years. He warned gang leaders that if they continue controlling our streets from the prisons, we will act with more determination. Peru will hold scheduled presidential elections next year when Boluarte's term would have ended. She faces multiple investigations for corruption and abuse of power. A severe shortage of fuel is hampering preparations for Bolivia's presidential runoff, which will see the Andean nation swing right after 2 decades of leftist rule. Right-wing former President Jorge Tuto Quigora, in fact, and center-right ex-mayor Rodrigo Paz go head-to-head in Sunday's election, which brings the curtain down on 2 decades of socialist rule launched by coca farmer Evo Morales in 2005. The race has been dominated by Bolivia's worst economy in nearly 4 decades. Acute shortages of fuel and hard currency, coupled with annual inflation of over 23%, has soured voters on the outgoing socialists. Both Quiroga and Paz have said they will cut fuel subsidies except for public transport companies and vulnerable economic sectors. As Ecuador grapples with a surge of violence related to the Latin American drug trade, an explosion took place at a crowded shopping mall in the port city of Guayaquil. As per the local authorities, the explosion killed 1 person and injured several others. The incident rattled local businesses, restaurants and hotels in the area. Police is investigating the cause of the explosion. Ecuador has become an epicenter of the global cocaine trade as cartels and mafias shed blood to gain turf. Violence and chaotic scenes like Tuesday's explosion are on the rise in Guayaquil as the city grapples with its prime coastal location for drug trafficking and other illegal enterprises. Madagascar is in political turmoil as the military seizes control, dissolving most state institutions. The National Assembly, however, remains active and has voted to impeach President Ange Rajoelina in defiance of his bid to dissolve the legislature from an undisclosed location. Rajoelina fled the country amid weeks of protests by Gen Z over corruption, failing public services and governance crisis. Here's more in the report.
Madagascar is in the grip of political upheaval after the military has seized control, dissolving all key institutions except the National Assembly, which has now voted to impeach President Ange Rajoelina. This follows after massive protest by Gen Z across the country. The National Assembly passed the resolution with 130 votes in favor, a dramatic rebuke to Rajoelina, who has gone into hiding after weeks of protests over his leadership and governance failures.
In application of Article 40.1 of the Constitution, the National Assembly, meeting in extraordinary session, shall pronounce the permanent dismissal of the President of the Republic due to his manifest incompatibilities and conflict of interest, activities of a nature to harm the dignity of the nation and national unity.
The move comes just after Rajoelina himself dissolved the National Assembly to block an impeachment vote, a step that further inflamed public anger. Thousands, including civil servants and trade unionists, poured into the streets demanding his resignation.
We are not satisfied because these are not the things we expected to hear in this speech. We want him to resign immediately. We do not want to wait any longer. We do not want propaganda and all that. We want him to resign.
Amid reports, Rajoelina has fled the country. He reappeared in a national address, saying he had been forced to relocate to a safe place due to threats to his life.
We have all seen that the crises that have occurred in the country have led to ruin and recession. There have been real plans since 25 September for a coup and assassination attempt against me.
The unrest began on September 25 over crippling water and power shortages, but quickly snowballed into a nationwide uprising over corruption, poor governance, and collapsing public services. With the president in hiding, parliament asserting its authority, and the military now in charge, Madagascar faces a volatile and uncertain political future. Bureau Report, DD India.
The United States urged all sides in Madagascar to find a peaceful solution that respects the constitution after an elite military unit took power. Under U.S. law, Washington is required to cut off aid to countries if it determines that military coups have taken place, although President Donald Trump's administration has already severely cut U.S. assistance around the world. The United States provided around $32 million to Madagascar in the fiscal year that ended last month, led by health assistance, according to official U.S. data. President Donald Trump awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the nation's highest civilian honor, to slain late activist Charlie Kirk, a prominent voice in the conservative movement before his assassination last month. Since his death, Trump has called Kirk a martyr for American freedom and vowed at his memorial service to carry on his work. Kirk was shot on September 10 while speaking at an event at Utah Valley University, a killing that shocked the nation and reignited debates over political violence. Officials have found no evidence that the suspect in Kirk's shooting acted in concert with any group. And in Venezuela, at least 14 miners have died in floods caused by heavy rain in the eastern part. Disaster relief agencies and the military said miners were working to recover the bodies of the workers from a gold mine in the town of El Callao. The workers were underground when heavy rain fell on the region, which borders both Guyana and Brazil, flooding several mine shafts. This latest incident adds to a growing list of mining tragedies in the region. Between 2023 and 2024, at least 30 miners were reported dead due to mine collapses across Venezuela's gold belt, raising serious concerns about safety enforcement and oversight. Indonesia's Mount Lewatobi Laki-Laki erupted on Wednesday, shooting volcanic ash 10 kilometers into the sky, forcing authorities to raise the alert system to its highest level. Lewatobi also erupted 2 hours before. The volcanic ash from that shot 9 kilometers into the sky. The volcano last erupted in August. It also erupted in July, causing flight disruptions to and from the nearby resort island of Bali. Dozens of people living in villages nearest to the volcano were evacuated after the eruptions. Indonesia, which has more than 120 active volcanoes, sits on the Pacific Ring of Fire, an area of high seismic activity that is atop multiple tectonic plates. And let's look at the other stories making news around the world. A small aircraft crashed near the indigenous Mayan village in Santa Apolonia, western Guatemala, killing 3 people, according to firefighters. Officials said the plane was on a private flight from La Aurora International Airport to Huehuetenango, near the Mexican border. Rescue teams found debris scattered across the crash site as investigations continue. In Japan, CTEC 2025 showcases cutting-edge technologies with about half focused on artificial intelligence. AI systems are being demonstrated that monitor office workers' stress, suggest breaks and adjust lighting for comfort. Other exhibits use AI to analyze golf swings and provide tips for improvement. The exhibition runs through Friday with global participation. And still to come on DD India News Hour. Brazilian Vice President along with Defence Minister to arrive in India in the afternoon on a 3-day visit. Tragic fire in Rajasthan bus kills 20, leaves over 15 seriously injured on Jaisalmer-Jodhpur route. Delhi NCR activates stage 1 of graded response action plan as air quality worsens.
This week on Defence Dynamics, India's defence momentum gathers force. From new missile deals and production lines to deeper naval cooperation with India, New Delhi's strategic partnerships are setting new benchmarks. Meanwhile, a Chinese move that could disrupt global defence supply chains, raising fresh concerns amongst major powers. Plus, Pakistan's growing unease as India-Afghanistan ties move towards a new phase of cooperation and trust. Catch it all this Wednesday at 8 p.m. IST only on DD India.
You're watching DD India News. I'm Siddharth Bharadwaj, and a quick recap of the headlines. India elected to the United Nations Human Rights Council for the 7th time for term 2026-28. This reflects India's unwavering commitment to human rights and fundamental freedoms. US government shutdown enters its 3rd week as Senate rejects Republican funding bill for the 8th attempt. Hamas hands over 4 more bodies of hostages after Israel threatens aid cut. Trump issues stern warning to Hamas, says it must disarm. Trump warns Argentina of aid cut if Javier Milei loses midterm elections later this month. Remarks come days after US promised a $20 billion bailout plan. Fed Chair Powell flags rising employment risks in the US, noting a sharp slowdown of job creation as private sector figures lay bare slowdown in hiring on September. India was elected to the United Nations Human Rights Council for the term 2026-28 for the 7th time today. India is among the 14 countries elected to serve on the Geneva-based UN Human Rights Council. India, Angola, Egypt, Mauritius, South Africa, Iraq, Pakistan, Vietnam, Estonia, Slovenia, Chile, Ecuador, Italy, United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland were elected to 3-year terms beginning January 1st. The 47-member council can discuss human rights issues and adopt non-binding resolutions on abuses when it chooses. India's permanent representative to the United Nations, P. Harish, thanked all delegations for their overwhelming support. In a social media post, he said, and I quote, "This election reflects India's unwavering commitment to human rights and fundamental freedoms. We look forward to serve this objective during our tenure." Brazilian Vice President Geraldo Alckmin, along with Defense Minister José Múcio Monteiro Filho, will arrive in India in the afternoon on a 3-day visit. Defense Minister Rajnath Singh will hold a meeting with the visiting leaders, and in a statement, the Defense Ministry said that the leaders will review the entire range of multifaceted relations in the field of defense between the two countries. The leaders will also exchange views on areas of mutual interest covering military to military and defense industrial cooperation. Trade and economic relations are expected to be a major focus of the Vice President's visit. Both India and Brazil are currently facing higher US tariffs, prompting efforts to strengthen bilateral trade and reduce dependence on external markets. Economic engagement between India and Brazil has grown steadily. During Prime Minister Narendra Modi's state visit to Brazil in July, the two leaders set a goal to raise bilateral trade to US dollars 20 billion within 5 years. In FY 2024-25, merchandise trade between the two nations reached US dollar 12.919 billion, making Brazil India's largest trading partner in Latin America and the Caribbean. And at least 20 people were killed after a bus caught fire while traveling in the western Indian state of Rajasthan on Tuesday. The vehicle, which carried over 50 passengers, was traveling between the cities of Jaisalmer and Jodhpur when the incident occurred. Prima facie, it appears that the fire broke out due to a short circuit. Over 15 passengers sustained serious burn injuries, with some suffering up to 70% burns. They were initially rushed to Jawahar Hospital in Jaisalmer and later referred to Jodhpur for advanced treatment. President expressed grief over the loss of lives in Jaisalmer bus mishap. In a post on X, she wrote, and I quote, "The news of the deaths of several people due to a fire in a bus in Jaisalmer, Rajasthan is extremely heartbreaking. I express my deepest condolences to the bereaved families and pray for the speedy recovery of the injured." Unquote. Prime Minister Modi also condoled the loss of lives in Jaisalmer bus mishap. Sharing his thoughts on X, he wrote, and I quote, "Distressed by the loss of lives due to a mishap in Jaisalmer, Rajasthan, my thoughts are with the affected people and their families during this difficult time, praying for the speedy recovery of the injured. An ex gratia of ₹2 lakh from PMNRF would be given to the next of kin of each deceased. The injured would be given ₹50,000, unquote. In response to worsening air quality in Delhi NCR, the Commission for Air Quality Management has activated Stage 1 of the Graded Response Action Plan. The move comes amid forecasts from the India Met Department and IITM predicting that pollution levels are likely to remain in the same category over the coming days. The committee has directed all concerned agencies in the NCR to implement, monitor and review the Stage 1 measures immediately to prevent further deterioration of air quality. A 27-point action plan as per Stage 1 of GRAP is applicable with immediate effect in the entire NCR. Several measures have been put in place to control dust and limit emissions. Thorough checks on polluting vehicles, better traffic management and emission controls in industries, power plants and brick kilns. Ensure regular lifting and proper disposal of industrial waste from industrial and non-development areas. Strict vigil to ensure that there are no burning incidents in the landfill sites, dump sites. Ensure that diesel generator sets are not used as regular source of power supply. Vehicles causing pollution may be fined or impounded. Traffic control measures include deployment of police at major intersections with instructions for drivers to switch off engines at red lights. Strictly enforce NGT SC's order on overage diesel, petrol vehicles and as per extant statutes. Now let's quickly understand what is GRAP. The Graded Response Action Plan is a framework of stratified measures and guidelines designed to combat rising air pollution in Delhi NCR. The AQI scale under GRAP has 5 categories: good, satisfactory, moderate, poor, and very poor. The 21st Heads of Asian Coast Guard Agencies meeting will conclude in Sydney today. A 4-member Indian Coast Guard delegation is participating in the meeting being hosted by the Australian Border Force. A premier regional forum consists of 21 member countries from Asia and beyond, fostering cooperation among Asian Coast Guard agencies on issues relating to maritime safety, security, environmental protection and law enforcement. India, as the chair of the Maritime Search and Rescue Pillar and member of working groups on environmental protection, prevention and control of unlawful activities at sea, information sharing and joint exercises, is contributing actively to the discussions and collaborative initiatives. Brazil, India, Italy and Japan vowed Tuesday to quadruple their production and consumption of renewable fuels, hoping other countries will join the pledge during UN climate talks in November. Brazilian Foreign Ministry official João Marcos Pais Leme said that he hopes to have a good number of signatories and other European countries are also interested. Lame was speaking on the sidelines of a meeting of representatives from 67 countries in the run-up to COP30 climate talks in Amazon city of Belém next month. The pledge involves quadrupling the production of sustainable fuels such as biofuels, hydrogen and some synthetic fuels by 2035 compared to 2024 levels. Pais Lame noted that these fuels can be used to replace planet-harming fossil fuels in sectors such as aviation, maritime transport or the cement and steel industries. India resumes all categories of international postal services to the United States from today, ending a nearly 2-month suspension triggered by changes in US customs regulations. The resumption follows extensive coordination between India Post and Customs and Border Protection approved qualified parties, along with successful systems trials in Delhi and Maharashtra. Under the new arrangement, all applicable import duties on parcels sent to the US will be collected upfront in India and remitted directly to CBP through these qualified parties. This resumption marks a major milestone in strengthening India's international postal and export logistics network and reflects India Post's growing role in supporting the government's vision of inclusive, export-driven economic growth. India remembers one of its most admired scientists, educators and former presidents, Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam, on his birth anniversary. The day is marked as a tribute not only to his achievement in science and public service, but also to his lifelong commitment to inspiring and guiding students. This day is dedicated to encouraging young minds to pursue excellence and innovation in their chosen fields, just as Dr. Kalam envisioned. In 2002, Dr. Kalam became India's 11th president, serving until 2007. His tenure was marked by accessibility, humility and a strong connection with citizens, especially the youth. Prime Minister Narendra Modi remembering Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam ji on his birth anniversary as a visionary who ignited young minds and inspired our nation to dream big. In a post on X, he wrote that Kalam's life reminds us that humility and hard work are vital for success. May we continue to build the India he envisioned, an India that is strong, self-reliant and compassionate. And still to come on DD India News. India's growth outlook remains resilient. And Ivory Coast qualifies for 2026 World Cup as the tournament expands to 48 teams, co-hosted by US, Canada and Mexico. Radio City Rockets in New York rehearse for the 2025 Christmas performance.
Goa, an adventure paradise like none other. From lush forests to rugged hills, from pristine ocean beach stretches to stunning lakes, there is something to explore in every corner of the state. And some adventures are wilder than others. Watch Postcards from Goa on National Geographic.
You're watching DD India News, or I'm Siddharth Bharadwaj. And Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell on Tuesday said that the US economy may be on a firmer footing, but warns the job market remains fragile. Speaking at a business economics conference in Philadelphia, he described a growing tension. Economic growth appears stronger, yet hiring has stalled. With official data disrupted by the government shutdown, the Fed plans to decide on future rate cuts meeting by meeting. Inflation remains above target, but weak employment raises new concerns. Powell emphasized there is no risk-free path as the Fed balances inflation control with job protection.
That the outlook for employment and inflation does not appear to have changed much since our September meeting 4 weeks ago. There is no risk-free path for policy as we navigate the tension between our employment and inflation goals. This challenge was evident in the dispersion of committee participants' projections at the September meeting. And I'll stress again that these projections should be understood as representing a range of potential outcomes whose probabilities evolve as new information informs our meeting-by-meeting approach to policymaking. We'll set policy based on the evolution of the economic outlook and the balance of risks rather than following a predetermined path.
Stocks jumped Wednesday as trade war fears were overshadowed by comments from Federal Reserve boss Jerome Powell that suggested the bank would cut interest rates again this month. After a volatile couple of days characterized by a fresh flare-up in China-US tensions, investors took the opportunity to jump back into the market and resume a months-long tech-fueled rally. India's growth outlook remains resilient even as global economic prospects dim, according to the International Monetary Fund's latest World Economic Outlook report. The report projects India's financial year 26 growth at 6.6%, revised up by 20 basis points from July's forecast of 6.4%, reflecting a strong Q1 carryover that offsets the impact of increased US tariffs on imports from India. Growth in FY27 is projected at 6.2%, down 20 basis points from July's estimate, as the initial momentum from FY26 gradually normalizes. The IMF has highlighted that India has recorded the strongest upside surprise among all emerging market and developing economies. The International Monetary Fund on Tuesday lifted its outlook for global growth this year, flagging a milder than expected economic hit from President Donald Trump's tariff policies while warning of risks ahead. In its flagship World Economic Outlook report compiled before the most recent US-China tariff spat, the IMF hiked its 2025 global growth forecast to 3.2%, up from 3% in July, while leaving its prediction for 2026 unchanged at 3.1%. IMF chief economist said the growth downgrade is at the modest end of the range.
In April, the US shook global trade norms by announcing sweeping tariffs. Our April report offered a range of estimates for the resulting growth downgrade, from modest to significant. 6 months on, where are we? The good news is that the growth downgrade is at the modest end of the range, with growth projected at 3.2% this year and 3.1% next year, while inflation has increased modestly and is proving more persistent.
The International Monetary Fund has once again revised Bangladesh's GDP growth forecast downward for the fiscal year 2026, projecting it at 4.9%. The growth is down from 5.4% in July and 6.5% in April. According to the IMF's latest World Economic Outlook released on October 14, inflation in Bangladesh is expected to ease to 8.8% in FY26 and further decline to 5.5% in FY27. The IMF's new growth forecast for Bangladesh aligns with other global institutions, with the World Bank projecting 4.8% and the Asian Development Bank estimating 5% growth for FY26. Meanwhile, the interim government has set a more ambitious growth target of 5.5% for FY26, surpassing projections made by international agencies. France's Prime Minister Sébastien Lecornu on Tuesday backed the suspension of an unpopular 2023 pensions reform to bolster his cabinet's survival and draw his country out of political crisis. One major sticking point for Lecornu was an unpopular 2023 pension reform that raised the retirement age from 62 to 64 with the Socialists, a key swing vote in Parliament. During his policy speech Tuesday, Lecornu said he supported suspending the reform, a move that could give the Prime Minister some breathing room from the immediate threat to his leadership. The decision brought some relief for the embattled Premier after the Socialists said they would not vote to oust him for now. Socialists called the move a victory for his party and said his group was ready to allow debates on the budget to proceed. Lecornu also promised he would not use the controversial tool to bypass a vote in Parliament on any draft laws and put our proposed bills to debate. And you're watching DD India News Hour. Time now for sport. And the 2026 World Cup will be co-hosted by the United States, Canada and Mexico. So far, 28 countries have qualified for the World Cup scheduled to take place from 11th of June 2026 across 16 cities. Argentina, the world champion, are among those to have qualified, but there are still 20 spots to fill. The latest entry being Ivory Coast, making history by returning to the games after 12 years. The Elephants overcame Kenya 3-0 in their final qualifier on Tuesday to finish top of their group and secure a berth. Captain Frank Kessie had the reigning African champions ahead after 7 minutes, but they squandered a hatful of chances before Yan Diomande added a second in the 54th minute. Amad Diallo then buried a 84th minute free kick into the corner for the third goal amid a torrential downpour in Abidjan. Notably, the new format of the FIFA World Cup will feature 12 4-team groups and an extra knockout round, a round of 32. The stage is set for maiden DP World India Championships as some of the biggest names in men's golf got the first feel of the Delhi Golf Club on Tuesday. Shubhankar Sharma and Anirban Lahiri, who have previously won on the DP World Tour, make a return to the Delhi Golf Club after a considerable gap as they tee up at the India Championships scheduled to start from Thursday. Featuring a star-studded international field including Ryder Cup stars Rory McIlroy, Tommy Fleetwood, Victor Hovland and Shane Lowry, alongside homegrown heroes Shubhankar Sharma and Anirban Lahiri, who has also earlier played on the PGA Tour. The tournament marks a new chapter for professional golf in India.
It'll be a really exciting week. We have obviously Rory McIlroy, who's the reigning Masters champion, Grand Slam winner, and it's historic in our sport. So for him to be in India the same year he won the Masters is truly amazing, and I'm really thankful that DP World made it happen. Tommy Fleetwood is here, who's the leading FedEx Cup champion, and then you have so many host of the Ryder Cup stars, a few Americans who've come, and then the usual top cream of the DP World Tour is here as well. So it's a great tournament.
The ICC Women's World Cup match between Sri Lanka and New Zealand was called off due to rain in Colombo on Tuesday. Sri Lanka posted 258 for 6 in their allotted 50 overs as Nilakshi De Silva gave the perfect finish to the innings with a quick fire innings of 55. Rain then halted play and New Zealand couldn't come out to bat. Both teams have shared 1 point each. New Zealand women will remain in Colombo for their next fixture against Pakistan women on Saturday, while Sri Lanka women will take on South Africa women on Friday. The Radio City Rockets rehearse for the 2025 Christmas performance opening November 6 at New York's Radio City Music Hall. This year's show features enhanced choreography and new immersive sound system with 84 dancers preparing for the high-energy holiday tradition. That's all for this edition of DD India News Hour, but let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. For those on the go, you can get all the latest news and updates from India and across the world on DD India mobile app. The app is available on both Android and iOS platforms, and you can scan the QR code to download now. We'll be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Siddharth Bharadwaj from all of us here in Delhi. Thanks for watching DD India News Hour.